In this training, we'll cover the Oregon Realtors Form 2.9, which is the On-Site Sewage Addendum. This is for edition 2025-2. It's the edition that was released in October of 2025. And it's worth noting because there were some changes to the timelines that are relatively significant, that are changes from what would previously existed in the earlier part of 2025, and will be the edition that is ongoing after 2025-2 goes into effect. It begins the same way as it always had before. We talk about what exactly this addendum is for. An on-site sewage system is used for treating and disposing of human waste on-site rather than putting it in through some sort of a public sewage system. Typically consists of a septic tank of some sort that separates solid and liquid wastes. It has some sort of an absorption field somewhere, a leach field, a drain field, seepage bed, that kind of thing. And it naturally treats the various effluent before it enters into the groundwater systems. The system may include or contain various different components like cesspools, dosing tanks, disposal trenches, leach lines, sand filters, capping fills, alternative treatment systems. All kinds of stuff is possible. There could be multiple on-site sewage systems at a single property. It could be possible that a property has 2 or 3 different septic systems that are on the property. And for more information, you can always visit DEQ's website where they have more information on being septic smart. Section 4 is the seller's representations and duties to provide records. Basically, when the seller enters a contract with the buyer, they're going to provide all records they have about the on-site sewage system's maintenance history, all testing that has been done to the system, all repair records that they have access to. If the seller has repaired a crack in the septic tank, they're supposed to tell the buyer about that because that does change the impact of how well this property is meeting the buyer's needs. The seller represents that the on-site septic system and all of its components and all the stuff on the subject property is in working order and is in compliance with all state, local, and federal laws. And if it is subject to any exclusions, if there's anything at play here that is not the case, they'll list it out. If there was a crack, if the septic system is not working, it's just some busted thing that they need to repair. If the seller has not used it in 2 years and they don't know what the condition of it is, they will specify in this representation section that they don't know, or they know things that are not necessarily compliant or in working order. They will specify. Now, this is the first place where there's a change between 2025-1 and before. In the next section, the parties can specify which on-site sewage system evaluations they are going to utilize as part of this transaction. Now, it previously said promptly the buyer will order from one or more contractors. Now it reads within 2 business days after mutual acceptance, buyer will order from one or more contractors who are licensed to provide these services. Now, there's an addition to this contract that states a service may only be ordered if a box below is checked, indicating which party pays for the service. If you don't check one of the boxes stating the buyer pays for it or the seller pays for it, that is not a service being ordered because nobody is paying for it. So make sure you specify if you want to have, for example, a tank location, if you want to have pumping and cleaning septic systems or cleaning the cesspool, that would be something you specify by saying the buyer pays for the pumping, the seller pays for existing system evaluation. Now, the main one that is done is on line 23, the existing system evaluation. This is the DEQ standard system evaluation. The results of this evaluation will be reported on DEQ's existing system evaluation report form. The seller is supposed to assist the system evaluator in obtaining any information they need to complete this report form, and the evaluation will include all the system's components unless you specify otherwise. You can do more limited searches or limited evaluations. It just depends on how you specify within this section. There is also an additional space for other services, the buyer or the seller's expense. You do the following other services. All of these services must be completed no later than 15, or you can choose the number of days, after mutual acceptance. The seller is supposed to cooperate with the buyer to facilitate the completion of those services by that deadline. The buyer is allowed to be present for these services. If the buyer does not complete the services because the buyer is ordering all these tests and they are for the buyer's benefit, if the buyer doesn't get them done within this time frame, this 15 business day time frame, the buyer is deemed to have waived the evaluation. They have accepted the condition of the septic system as is without the inspection because it was the buyer's own delays that caused the septic system to not get evaluated. Now, if there is a seller failure to cooperate, the buyer is not considered to have waived this. If the reason why the buyer wasn't able to get existing system evaluation done within 15 business days is that the seller locked the front gate and didn't allow anyone in, then the buyer is still allowed to terminate under this addendum. Now, if the buyer is within their timeline, congratulations. The buyer has this right to terminate a negotiation period. This is section 6, buyer's duty to notify negotiation period and termination rights. If a report from a licensed contractor is provided on one of these various services as described in that section we just covered, and it is unacceptable, and the buyer is within the proper timeline and not enough days have passed that they are way too close to closing, the buyer has a right to notify the seller. Hey seller, I got a report back, and it's bad. The septic system has some real problems with it. After providing that notice, the buyer has the sewage evaluation period to either terminate or to come to some sort of an agreement with the seller. If they say the septic system is cracked and it looks like it's going to be very expensive and I don't want to pay for it, the buyer can just terminate. Hey seller, it is unacceptable. Therefore, I terminate. Congratulations, buyer. That's your out. Alternately, hey seller, the septic system is cracked. I want you to replace it. Are you okay with that? Because if you're okay with it, let's keep going. But I don't want to buy a property with a cracked septic system because that's gross. That's perfectly acceptable as well. The parties can renegotiate. If they do reach an agreement in writing, hey, seller agrees that they're going to replace the septic system. Buyer no longer has a right to terminate. The seller's just created a new obligation in writing for themselves that says, I'm going to replace the septic system. The buyer's failure to terminate during this time frame, they give themselves a short sewage evaluation period. If they don't terminate within the sewage evaluation period, the buyer has no right to terminate. It is a use it or lose it right. If the buyer has given themselves a right to terminate and they got a test evaluation that's bad, they should not sit on that for several weeks and then decide that the test results were bad. They should make the decision quickly, rip off the bandage and let everyone move on and be done with the transaction. If the seller does request any of the reports or evaluations, buyer, you need to send them to the seller if they don't already have them. From there, we have buyer's acknowledgments. Essentially, the buyer says, I understand that my testing of the septic system will give me a point-in-time understanding of the sewage line or the septic system. It may change over time. It could be that there are shifting soils and they crack part of the leach field and the leach field isn't working like it used to be. It could be that some point in between when the buyer evaluates the system and when the actual closing happens that the septic system gets clogged or that the septic tank is overflowing for whatever reason, or something goes wrong and it backs up. There could be all kinds of things that happen between when you test and when you close. And by signing this agreement, the buyer acknowledges that the testing is only going to tell them how the system exists at the time they tested. There could be all sorts of catastrophic events that change the outcome. A buyer is encouraged to review DEQ's Be Septic Smart brochure. It just tells them all sorts of things about septic systems and what can go wrong, what could go right. So the buyer needs to look into those things, and they do understand. By signing this agreement, they acknowledge and understand that if they have some specific types of septic systems that have, for example, sand filter systems that were permitted after 2014, there may be some additional maintenance and service contracts that are required on those systems because they're essentially at law. There are additional standards for how they are maintained. That's essentially all there is on the septic addendum, but it's worth noting. If you have questions about any of these forms or if you have comments, please send a comment to forms@OregonRealtors.org and let us know what your thoughts are.